One afternoon in a bustling Washington, D.C. restaurant, Barron Trump sat quietly at his table, absorbed in a book. The restaurant was alive with conversation and laughter as businessmen and politicians gathered for lunch. Yet Barron remained calm and distant, a young man seemingly untouched by the busy atmosphere around him. In the far corner, an elderly man sat alone, his military uniform hinting at a lifetime of service. His silver-white hair and weathered face told the story of years gone by. As he tried to pay for his meal, his hands shook, fumbling for his wallet. The waiter patiently waited for him to find it, but it was clear that the veteran needed more than just a meal today. He needed a little kindness. Barron noticed the situation. His eyes softened with compassion, and without a second thought, he stood up and approached the veteran's table. "Let me help," he said gently, addressing the waiter. The waiter paused, glancing between Barron and the elderly man, but Barron insisted. "I'll pay for his meal," he repeated with kindness. The elderly man shook his head. "I can't accept that, young man," he protested. Barron smiled warmly. "It's no trouble, really. Please let me." The veteran, surprised and touched, muttered, "Thank you. You don't know how much this means to me." Barron returned to his table, but the veteran couldn't stop thinking about the young man's unexpected generosity. A few moments later, he leaned toward a woman sitting nearby, eager to share his story. "That young man's family saved my life years ago," he began. "During the Vietnam War, I was injured and left with nothing. I had no family, no home, and I was struggling to get by. One day I was sitting outside a diner in New York when a man approached me. He didn't just hand me $1 and walk away. He sat with me, listened to my story, and made sure I had a place to stay. That man was Fred Trump, Barron's grandfather." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Fred Trump?" The veteran nodded. "Yes, he didn't owe me anything, but he gave me a job, a roof over my head, and told me, 'You served this country, and it's the least we can do.'" I've never forgotten those words. By now, others in the restaurant were listening. Intrigued by the veteran's story, a man in his 40s leaned in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but my grandfather also served in Vietnam. He used to talk about how much it meant when people back home cared enough to help. What Fred Trump did for you, it's rare." The veteran's expression softened. "It's the small things, son. Fred Trump's kindness gave me a second chance." A nearby young mother, overhearing the conversation, added, "My dad always said the same thing. When someone lifts you up, even a little, you pass it on. It's like a chain reaction. What Barron did today, it proves kindness still matters." The veteran smiled softly, grateful for the shared understanding. "Exactly. Sometimes it's just about being seen. A little act of kindness can change everything." As the conversations continued, one of the waitresses approached the veteran. "My brother served in Iraq," she said quietly. "When he came home, he told me that the small gestures, like people thanking him, kept him going." The veteran nodded. "It's the little things that matter. When you feel like everything's falling apart, it's those moments that make the difference." Back at his table, Barron noticed something had shifted in the restaurant. People were looking at him differently, their expressions thoughtful. He didn't fully understand why, but there was a palpable change in the atmosphere. As the meal came to an end, the elderly veteran stood and walked over to Barron's table. Barron looked up, surprised, as the veteran extended his hand. "Young man, I wanted to thank you in person. What you did today, it brought me full circle. Your family's legacy of kindness lives on in you." Barron took his hand, his voice steady but soft. "You deserved it, sir." The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath as the two men shared this quiet moment. Some had tears in their eyes, others smiled warmly. In that brief exchange, the bond between them, one of kindness, history, and service, was clear. As the veteran walked out of the restaurant, he paused and tipped his hat to Barron. "You've got a good heart, son. Don't ever lose that." Barron, watching him leave, felt something stir within him. It wasn't just about paying for a meal. It was about continuing a legacy of kindness, one act at a time.